Welcome to Truth of the Spirit and Watching the Saints. I'm Patty Bruner. On this episode, as we wrap up this series, I want to share with you some movies about some lesser-known saints. Reluctant Saint is a movie about Saint Joseph of Cupertino. It's titled Reluctant, but the character of our movie could have been called the Idiot Saint, a word used in the movie to describe him. Giuseppe had to go to school until he was 20 years old because of a learning disability. The movie shows him receiving his diploma because the nuns wanted to get rid of him. As a young man, St. Joseph, Giuseppe of Cupertino, is portrayed as very slow and foolish but gentle. After his graduation, his strong-willed mother pushed him off on her brother, who is a monk, so that there would be someone to take care of him because she was getting old. We are shown quirky circumstances that lead to his ordination as a priest. Later in the movie, we realize that there's a lot more than face value to this man. After I'd seen the movie numerous times, I read a short biographical note on his feast day on the Laudate app, and I discovered that he was also known as the Gaper, not from being stupid, but because at age 8, he began to receive ecstatic visions that left him gaping and staring off into space. And these visions were easily triggered by sacred sound or sacred pictures or even holy thoughts. But even not knowing this about St. Joseph of Cupertino, I've always been encouraged by the movie where a simple man was advanced by circumstances into the priesthood where he belonged. In truth, he could barely read or write, and also had a hot temper. We really not are seeing that in the movie. In truth, he was not allowed admittance to the friars, minors, conventuals for lack of education at age 17. And he was also kicked out of the Capuchins because his frequent ecstasies made him a poor worker. Now, that we do see in the movie. And then he was accepted by the Franciscans. The movie shows Joseph's hidden wisdom in the barnyard, discussing the Trinity. Usually his wisdom was quite hidden as we watch Joseph studying for the priesthood, but unable to learn. With a tutor, he learns the scripture about the Good Shepherd, mostly because he loves animals. In the Gospel of Luke, to the exclusion of learning anything else. So he learns the passage in the Gospel of Luke about the Good Shepherd, about the shepherd leaving the 99 to go after the one. Well, when he goes for his testing to become a priest, that's the passage he's asked to quote, and so he knows it very well. And so they pass him on. In truth, he is the patron of students and test takers. I can see how students could ask for his intercession to help them study for tests, and for the test to only include the items they knew. I can remember praying for that to happen, but I wish I had known to call upon the intercession of St. Joseph of Cupertino. I have prayed Psalm 119 for my children and grandchildren, verses 99 and 100. It goes like this: I have more insight than all my teachers because I ponder your testimonies, and I have more understanding than my elders because I keep your precepts. When I was younger, I watched a cute TV series called The Flying Nun with Sally Field. And the premise of that series was that she played Sister Patril, and since Sister Patril was so tiny, the wind could pick her up and she could fly around to various places during the Lord's work. Well, here with St. Joseph of Cupertino, we have a true flying monk. A key occurrence in the movie is the levitation by Joseph of Cupertino whenever he prayed in ecstasy. For this trait, he is the patron saint of air crews, air forces, air travelers, flyers, aircraft pilots, aviators, flyers, astronauts, and paratroopers, all of which did not exist when he was born in 1603. In the movie, his nemesis accused him of occult influence, and in truth, he was questioned by the Inquisition and was sent from one Capuchin or Franciscan house to another. I love the end of the movie where his nemesis walks beside him, holding a rope tied to him, tethering him like a balloon at the Macy's Thanksgiving parade, resigning to his oddity and recognizing his sanctity. In truth, Joseph's ecstasies in public caused both admiration and disturbance in the community, and for 35 years he was not allowed by his superiors to attend choir, to go to the common refectory, to walk in procession, or say Mass in church, so as to prevent making a spectacle. And he was ordered to remain in his room with a private chapel. The Reluctant Saint stars Maximilian Schnell, and his nemesis is played by Ricardo Montalban. The next movie I'll review is Paquita. This Italian movie from 2009 has English subtitles. The story of this modern saint is so compelling and the acting so well done that as long as your screen is large enough to read the subtitles, you will be totally engrossed in this story. St. Joseph Paquita was born in Sudan in Africa in 1869, and she died in Italy in 1947 and was canonized in the year 2000 by Pope John Paul II. The movie follows Truth, telling her compelling story of her childhood in Africa and how her village was overtaken by another tribe, and the horror of her life as a slave. Paquita was not the name she received from her parents at birth, but the fright and the terrible experiences she went through made her forget the name she was given by her parents. Paquita, which means fortunate, was the name given to her by her kidnappers. The movie then takes a lot of poetic license to share how she becomes a nanny servant to a little girl, Aurora, in Italy, whose mother dies at her birth. The movie shows her rescue of Paquita by Aurora's father, Marin, a Venetian merchant. A rescue, not a liberation, and he retains her like a slave. The movie then gives us a view of the harsh treatment within the peasant landlord society of Italy. We begin to witness the goodness within Paquita, who eventually wins over the town during her caring service during a smallpox epidemic. She's rescued by a priest when her owner turns against her, and she begins to learn about Christ. She wants to become a nun, and Marin objects, leading to a court case where she is given the freedom to choose staying with Aurora or with the convent. The truth is just as dramatic. After the horrors of her slavery and the childhood which accurately portrayed in the movie, so not rated G, she was sold and resold in the markets of El Obeid and of Khartoum. At the age of 13, she was sold to a Turkish general, and every day his mistresses punished her with whips and beatings. Paquita underwent the excruciating ordeal of tattooing. In the capital of Sudan, Paquita was bought by an Italian consul. For the first time since the day she was kidnapped, No one used the lash when giving her orders. Instead, she was treated in a loving and cordial way. Political situations formed the consul to leave for Italy. Paquita obtained permission to go with him and with a friend of his, Augusto Mincelli. In Italy, Mincelli's wife talked the Italian consul into allowing Paquita to stay with them, and later she became the nanny for her daughter, Mimina. The Mincellis, who returned to Africa to work, sent Paquita and Mimina to live at a convent school, where Paquita learned about God, whom she had experienced in her heart without knowing who he was, ever since she was a child. Receiving her sacraments, she received the name Josephine. Later, the Mincellis wanted Paquita and Mimimi to return to Africa with them, and a court decided that since Italy did not allow slavery, Paquita was of legal age and freely could choose her own future. She spent the next 50 years in the convent. The movie accurately portrayed her gentleness with children as a daughter of charity, including her use of the African rhythms of music. St. Joseph Paquita dictated her autobiography used as a source in the movie. In truth, she did say, "If I were to meet the slave traders who kidnapped me, and even those who tortured me," she reflected, "I would kneel and kiss their hands, for if that had not happened, I would not be a Christian and a religious today." Just be sure to have your tissues handy as you watch this great movie about a wonderful saint. There are so many other saints that I could choose from that have movies about their lives. St. Teresa of Lisieux, St. Barbara, St. Anthony of Padua, St. Rita, St. Francis of Assisi, St. Philip Neri, and on and on. But the final saint of this series is St. John Bosco. There are two excellent movies about his life: Don Bosco, starring Ben Gazzara in 2004, and St. John Bosco, Mission to Love, starring Flavio Encina in 1988. The second one is dubbed into English and is twice as long as the first, but both movies give us the insight to this great saint who went against public thinking to not just educate poor young boys, but to give them love, attention, nourishment, and fun. The main difference, other than length in the two movies, is the main adversaries. In St. John Bosco, Mission to Love, his main adversaries are clergy, who object to his waste of time, talent, and money. In Don Bosco, his main adversaries are the merchants, and it covers political revolution. In truth, at various times he received their support in his beginnings. As his following grew, he faced so many obstacles they seemed overwhelming. His perseverance in the face of all difficulties led many to the conclusion that he was insane, and an attempt was even made to confine him in an asylum. Complaints were lodged against him, declaring his community to be a nuisance, owing to the character of the boys he befriended. After he moved to the open field shown in the movies, then to the shed, his group grew to 700 members. Don Bosco took lodgings nearby, where he was joined by his mother, Mama Margaret, as Don Bosco's mother came to be known, and she gave the last 10 years of her life in devoted service to the little inmates of this first Salesian home. When she joined her son at the oratory, the outlook was not bright, but sacrificing what small means she had, even to parting with her home, its furnishings, and her jewelry, she brought all the solicitude and love of a mother to these children of the streets. The evening classes increased, and gradually dormitories were provided for the many who desired to live at the oratory. Thus was founded the first Salesian home, which now houses about 1,000 boys. The municipal authorities by this time had come to recognize the importance of the work which Don Bosco was doing, and he began with much success a fund for the erection of technical schools and workshops. These were all completed without serious difficulty. In 1868, Don Bosco decided to build a church. He experienced considerable difficulty in raising the necessary money, but the charity of some friends finally enabled him to complete it. The same year, 50 priests and teachers who had been assisting him formed a society under a common rule which Pius IX approved. As in the movie, St. John Bosco originally saw the plight of the boys as he visited the prisons. The movies show the conditions of child labor and make the point that Father Bosco doesn't let the boys work more than 8 hours and make sure they get a break for lunch. This was not the case in the public square of working. They worked from daybreak past dark with no break, just enough to earn some bread for the day. The tradesmen didn't like the source of cheap labor to be upset, nor the ideas to spread to others about pay and work hours. St. John Bosco attracted the tough boys of the streets of Turin in Italy with circus-type tricks and bread and won them over with love. In truth, John Bosco, as a child, would go to circuses and fairs and carnivals, and then he would practice the tricks he saw the magicians perform, and then put on one-boy shows. After his performance, while he still had an audience of boys, he would repeat the homily he had earlier heard that day in church. Depending on the generosity of others and the provision of God, Don Bosco built oratories for the boys to come and receive faith, civility, a trade, and education. He formed the Salesian Society, which has spread throughout the world. In truth, John Bosco's father died when he was 2 years old, and as soon as he was able, he worked to help his family. Having suffered much in his own youth and growing up without a father, gave him compassion for the orphans. John's early years were spent as a shepherd, and he received his first instruction at the hand of the parish priest. John possessed a ready wit and a retentive memory. Owing to the poverty of the home, he was often obliged to turn from his books to the field. But the desire of what he had to give up never left him. In 1835, he entered the seminary. In 1841, was ordained a priest by the Archbishop of Turin. His deep devotion to and trust in Our Lady was a great source of blessings and strength for his work with youth. When Father Bosco died in 1888, the movies display his popularity. His success at the end of each of the movies comes when we discover which of his boys became bishops, priests, and successful businessmen. Pope Pius XI beatified him in 1929 and canonized him in 1934. In the United States, we have a similar role model in Father Edward J. Flanagan, who founded Boys Town in 1917. And the movie was presented with an Academy Award in 1938, Boys Town, starring Spencer Tracy, and Mickey Rooney. In our parish, we have a group called Transforming Force, who reaches out to young boys that are wayward and going the way perhaps of gangs and juvenile delinquencies. And Transforming Force has been very successful in our parish and in our diocese. During the next episode of Truth in the Spirit, we will begin a new series on the Eucharist and other sacraments. You've been listening to Watching the Saints, a movie review series on Truth of the Spirit with Patty Bruner. I invite you to subscribe and to come back for more. With the Holy Spirit, there's always more. Amen.
This is the Padua Podcast Network. PaduaMedia.com